The throttle locked open 6 seconds before Riftwing 12 reached the grandstand. Grant Mercer saw the mismatch before the alarms began. On his safety display, the pilot command was falling toward 0. In the machine itself, the mechanical throttle remained wide open. "Kill the test lane," he said. The control booth did not answer. Around him, technicians stared through the glass as the silver racing craft tore past the starting pylons. Its stabilizers flashed blue, then white. Beyond the transparent barrier, 30,000 spectators rose as one, unaware that the vehicle was no longer following its pilot. Grant hit the emergency channel. "Riftwing 12, reduce thrust." A woman's voice came back through a wash of static. "I'm reducing it." Instead, the craft accelerated. The mandatory test loop ran close to the service gantry before bending away from the crowd. The vehicle was not yet at full race speed, but the barrier ahead had been designed to deflect debris, not absorb an intact machine. Grant left the booth. He reached the outer platform as Riftwing 12 came around the turn. The access gantry extended over the service lane, built for rolling inspections at a fraction of the speed below. Grant clipped a safety tether to his belt and wrapped the free end around the rail. A technician grabbed his sleeve. "You cannot board at that speed." "Then ask it to slow down." The craft struck the service line. Grant jumped. His boots hit the maintenance ridge and slid. The tether snapped tight, slamming his shoulder against the hull. For one breath, he hung beside the moving craft, the grandstand a bright blur beyond him. Then he caught the edge of the maintenance hatch and pulled himself in. The compartment shook hard enough to blur the warning lights. Heat rolled from the power conduits. The pilot's command stream still showed repeated attempts to reduce thrust, but another signal was arriving after each one, reopening the throttle before the machine could respond. Grant drove his burned fingers under the cover of the physical breaker. "Pilot, brace." "For what?" "A very expensive stop." He pulled. Power vanished. Riftwing 12 dropped from thrust to momentum in a single violent shudder. Grant struck the inner wall. Somewhere ahead, the pilot made a short sound of pain, but she kept the nose aligned with the lane. The craft crossed the runoff strip, clipped the first layer of the magnetic barrier, and stopped with its forward hull less than 50 yards from the grandstand. For several seconds, there was no sound inside the maintenance compartment except cooling metal and Grant's breath. Then the pilot said, "You broke the safety seal." Grant flexed his aching hand. "You are welcome." The hatch opened from outside before she could answer. Race security surrounded Riftwing 12. The pilot emerged from the forward cockpit under her own power. She was tall, even by Orvani standards, with copper blue skin and a narrow line of silver sensory filaments sweeping back from her temples. Her racing suit carried the black and gold markings of Axiom Racing. A neural interface curved behind each ear and disappeared beneath the collar. She ignored the medics and looked directly at Grant. "Ithara Qel," she said, "and I did not order that acceleration." "Grant Mercer." "I know." That stopped her. Before she could ask what he had seen, Chief Steward Elsamar arrived with a team of officials. Elson's pale gray uniform showed no team colors. She glanced at the broken seal, then at the grandstand, where spectators were being guided away from the damaged barrier. "This vehicle is impounded," she said. "Pilot Qel, your response instability has been recorded as the cause of the event." Ithra's eyes narrowed. "My command record will show the opposite." The certified record shows a delayed reduction, followed by an involuntary acceleration response. Grant stepped closer. "That is not what the raw line showed." Elson turned to him. "And you are?" "The navigation safety engineer assigned to the moving inspection grid." The mechanical throttle stayed open after her control signal fell. He pulled up the trace on his wrist display. The file appeared for half a second, then vanished beneath a red notice, saying that the system owner had revoked Grant's access. Grant looked across the service lane. Dorian Vaughn stood behind the officials, immaculate in the dark coat of Axiom Velocity, the corporation that owned Axiom Racing. His expression held concern, but not surprise. "The raw buffer is proprietary team data," Dorian said. "It will be reviewed through the proper channel." You removed it while I was speaking. I protected an active race system from an unauthorized copy. Elson raised one hand before the exchange could grow. Mr. Mercer, you entered a sealed vehicle and interrupted its primary power. Whatever you believe you saw, Riftwing 12 cannot return to the course without a licensed technical supervisor accepting responsibility for the physical changes. It should not return to the course at all. On that point, Dorian said, "We agree." Ithara moved between them. "No." Grant stared at her. "The machine just tried to put you through a grandstand. The machine followed an order that was not mine, which is an excellent reason to stop. Stopping is what they need." She opened a contract panel on her forearm display. The first page looked like an ordinary competition agreement. She skipped past sponsorship terms and medical disclosures until she reached a section labeled Active Neural Support. Grant read it once, then again. The support unit behind Ithara's ears did more than connect her nervous system to the vehicle. Years of high-speed neural racing had left her unable to regulate the link without assisted filtering. If she withdrew after the test session had been certified, Axiom could classify the support as abandoned competition property. The unit would be disabled permanently. "That would end your career," Grant said. "It would do more than that. Without the filter, I cannot safely use a racing link again. They would own every year I have left on a track by making sure I could never enter one." "Why sign this?" "Because when I signed it, the support was presented as medical equipment. The ownership clause appeared after the last contract revision. Refuse the revision, lose the support. Accept it, keep racing until they decide your value has ended." Dorian's voice remained calm. "The clause protects proprietary technology from misuse." Ithara did not look at him. "It protects you from athletes who learn to say no." Grant studied the contract timing. The test session had already been certified. If Ithara withdrew, the disable command would become valid. If she continued, she still had one possible route into the contract core. Completing a full official lap under her own neural signature would establish her as an active competitor. During performance confirmation, the system would then have to reveal who controlled her support. "A valid lap only lets you see the core," Grant said. "I know. It does not let you change it." "I know that too." "Then what is your plan after you see it?" Ithara held his gaze. "Survive long enough to find out." Grant almost laughed, but nothing in her face made the answer funny. Elson consulted her display. Riftwing 12 has one path back to the starting grid. A licensed engineer must rearm the physical breaker, supervise navigation directly, and place a personal certification code on every modification. The pilot remains responsible for neural control. If either requirement is refused, the vehicle is disqualified. Dorian said, "Axiom will not authorize an outside engineer." "The safety seal was broken during an emergency," Elson replied. "Your authorization is not the deciding factor. Certification is." Grant understood why Dorian had objected. Any Axiom technician would work through the same system that had erased the raw trace. Grant had seen the mismatch. He also knew exactly what state the breaker was in, and the race was less than an hour from launch. He looked at Ithara. "If I rearm it, we do not have another full shutdown. The emergency restart reserve is spent. Pull that breaker again, and the race is over. Then do not pull it because you dislike my choice. I pulled it because your vehicle was aimed at 30,000 people, and I am alive because you did. That does not give you the right to own the next decision." The words landed harder than the accusation deserved, because Grant could see why she had made it. "All right," he said. "I control navigation limits, load distribution, and the physical safety path. You control thrust, reflex, and race strategy. Either of us can call for a stop if we identify a real mechanical limit. I do not surrender your race for you, and I do not hide a limit that could break the vehicle." That last part sounded rehearsed. It became necessary the moment you started talking. There was the smallest shift at the corner of her mouth. Not a smile, but close enough to tell him she had heard the humor rather than mistaken it for contempt. Dorian stepped forward. "This arrangement is unacceptable." Elson looked at the countdown on the grid clock. "It is legal. That is the relevant condition." Grant and Ithara had 41 minutes. They moved Riftwing 12 into a sealed repair bay. Grant stripped the burned cover from the breaker and inspected the manual contacts. The emergency stop had fused one edge of the switch, but the main line could be reset once. He replaced the cover with a mechanical latch and marked the work with his certification code. The vehicle log displayed his name, identified him as a licensed test engineer, and recorded that he had accepted full responsibility. Ithara watched the word settle into the vehicle log. Grant noticed that she was not looking at the repair. She was looking at his name. "The code cannot be removed after launch," he said. "Every change I make will stay attached to it." Axiom technicians use team credentials, which means responsibility belongs to the company instead of the person, and yours belongs only to you. That is generally how names work. Ithara touched the edge of the broken seal. On this circuit, names usually disappear behind sponsors. Grant had spent most of his career believing certification protected people because someone could always be held accountable. Ithara had lived under a system where accountability moved downward and control moved upward. Her name remained attached to every mistake, including the ones Axiom created. Dorian's name appeared nowhere on the command path. "Then we keep a record of which choices are actually ours," Grant said, "even if the official record does not. Especially then. If this fails," she said, "they will blame you too. That almost makes me feel included." He checked the throttle assembly and found no mechanical fault. The override had reached it through a safety priority channel, one designed to correct dangerous pilot input. Someone had made the system interpret Ithara's attempt to slow as the danger. He could read the path, but not its source. The line disappeared into the encrypted race network. "Can you block it?" Ithara asked. "Not without blocking every automatic correction tied to it. At this speed, that would give us about 3 seconds of independence followed by a very educational crash. Then we identify the false commands before they become movement. Your neural decisions arrive too quickly for a display. Not for me. You'll be busy making them." Grant looked at the two control streams. Ithara's input carried a biological rhythm beneath the commands, a pattern created by breath, pulse, and muscle preparation. A false instruction could imitate the format of a command, but not the full sequence leading into it. "Breathe with the turn count," he said. Ithara looked over from the pilot cradle. "That is your solution?" "Is a reference. For counts in, 4 out. When control moves between us, 1 short pulse from the person giving it, and 2 from the person receiving it. Axiom built a neural prediction network, and you want to fight it with breathing. I also have tools. I'm trying not to make you jealous." She tested the pattern. Her first cycle was too fast. On the second, Grant master cadence. The shared line formed as a faint wave beneath the 2 command streams. "The network can insert a single instruction," he said. "It may copy 1 confirmation. It cannot predict both of us changing the same sequence together unless it takes continuous control. If it does that, the race record stops looking valid. This will not prevent interference. No, it tells us when one of us is not the person making a choice." Ithara leaned back into the cradle. "That distinction matters. I thought it might." They tested the handoff twice. Ithara signaled once. Grant answered twice and took the navigation correction. He returned it in the same order. The process added only a fraction of a second, but at racing speed a fraction could become a wall. "We use it only when authority changes," Ithara said. "Not for every movement." Agreed. Grant inspected the cooling reserve. The restart had consumed less than he feared, but the manual stop had heated the power spine and left them with no room for another uncontrolled acceleration. Outside the bay, the starting grid began to fill. Elson entered remotely through the service display. "Riftwing 12 is cleared under joint control. Mr. Mercer, your certification will remain attached to the vehicle for the full session." "Understood." Pilot Qel, withdrawal after launch will activate the contract condition already acknowledged. Ithara's jaw tightened. "Understood." Dorian appeared behind Elson in the feed. Axiom Velocity accepts no responsibility for unauthorized control changes. Grant closed the channel. "Was that necessary?" Ithara asked. "No, it was satisfying." The launch cradle carried Riftwing 12 on a Crownline Circuit. Orvani spread beneath the transparent outer rails, copper deserts broken by silver cities and long bands of cloud. Above them, the race course climbed into the dark edge of the atmosphere. The first lap would take them through the vacuum tunnel, the gravity inversion field, and the rank control gates before returning to the confirmation line. Only then would Ithara's neural signature become valid inside the contract core. Until that moment, they had no proof, no right access, and no safe way out. The countdown began. Grant settled into the navigation cradle behind and to the right of Ithara. Their controls overlapped in the center display, but remained visibly separate. Her breathing entered the shared line. For counts in, for counts out. The start signal changed. Ithara launched cleanly. For 3 seconds, Riftwing 12 followed her exactly. Then Grant saw an acceleration command appear between one breath and the next. False input, he said. I feel it. He tightened the navigation corridor to keep them from striking the vehicle ahead. Ithara cut thrust, but Grant continued correcting after the danger had passed. She pushed back to keep her chosen line. Their control streams collided. Riftwing 12 shuddered sideways. 2 racers swept past on the left, then another on the right. Release my line, Ithara said. You were accelerating. The system was accelerating. I corrected it. I needed to know the correction would hold. Then confirm. Do not occupy. The entrance to the vacuum tunnel opened ahead, a black circle rimmed with cooling lights. The leaders entered first. By the time Grant returned the full racing line, Riftwing 12 had fallen into the rear third of the field. Ithara gave one pulse. Grant answered twice and released the correction. They crossed into vacuum with less energy, a worse position, and the first proof that their method could expose a false command. They also had proof that knowing who had made a decision would not matter if neither of them trusted the other to keep it. Inside the vacuum tunnel, the sound of the race disappeared. The hull still carried vibration into their seats, but there was no air outside to carry the engines. The tunnel became a long black chamber filled with racing lights and silent vehicles. Without atmospheric drag, every craft gained speed. Without moving air, heat had nowhere to go. Grant watched the cooling load climb. 2 degrees above the entry model, he said. Because we lost the clean line, Ithara rolled Riftwing 12 between 2 slower vehicles. Grant saw the left stabilizer approach its limit and corrected the angle. She adjusted thrust at the same time, moving toward the narrow gap she had chosen. His correction pushed them away from it. That was my opening, she said. Your left stabilizer was overloaded. For half a second is how overloads begin. She tried a second pass. Grant tightened the navigation corridor again. The stabilizers fired against each other, wasting energy as one system tried to preserve Ithara's line and the other tried to flatten it. Heat rose another 3 degrees. Ithara's breathing shortened, and Grant assumed she was angry until he saw a pulse of pain cross the shared neural display. What is happening in the left drive? Nothing I cannot manage. That is not a measurement. Neither is your fear. The words sharpened the space between them. Grant almost answered, but the cooling graph jumped again. A warning tone sounded in the cockpit, announcing that their thermal reserve had been reduced. At the current rate, they would have to drop below race speed before the tunnel exit. That would cost more than position. Failing to complete the lap inside the qualifying time would keep Ithara's signature from becoming valid. Grant widened the corridor by 1 degree. Tell me where the pain begins. I said I can manage it. You also said you would not hide a limit that could break the vehicle. The vehicle is not breaking. I cannot know that if the feedback I am using is false. Another pulse of pain crossed the display, stronger this time. It arrived a fraction before the left drive reported extra heat. Grant understood. The neural support was amplifying the sensation ahead of the actual load, forcing Ithara to react early. Each early correction triggered his stabilizers. Their conflict created the heat the false pain had predicted. The pain is part of the loop, he said. It is arriving before the temperature rise. Ithara went still for half a breath. They're making my body create the fault. Yes, I need the exact point where you feel it. She gave him the location, first reluctantly, then with the precision of a pilot describing a turn. The pain began at the base of her neck, moved down her left arm, and reached her hand before the drive temperature changed. Grant shifted the navigation system away from her smallest corrections. He stopped trying to flatten every line and built a wider corridor around the route she wanted. "You choose inside this boundary," he said. "I'll only intervene if the frame crosses it. That gives me less than 3 yards at this speed." Luxury has been reduced due to demand. Her breath caught. This time was almost a laugh. Ithara aimed for the next gap. Grant saw a false thrust command enter between her inhale and exhale. He did not seize her line. "Not yours," he said, correcting. She reduced thrust on the right, rolled under the wake of the vehicle ahead, and used its heat shadow to cross the gap without firing the overloaded stabilizer. Grant held the outer limit and did nothing more. Riftwing 12 past 2 racers. The cooling graph leveled. They continued through the tunnel in the same division of labor. Ithara called each change in pain before it became a command. Grant separated sensation from real load and adjusted only the corridor. Once, the network inserted a false turn that copied Ithara's usual timing. It failed to match her breath. Grant called it. She ignored it, and the vehicle stayed true. By the tunnel exit, they had recovered 4 positions and preserved enough cooling reserve for the rest of the lap. The final pass inside the tunnel required both of them to act without speaking. A broad-hulled vehicle ahead vented a sheet of heat across the center lane. Ithara felt the thermal wash through the neural link before Grant's sensors resolved its shape. She moved toward the upper wall, but the route narrowed beside a damaged cooling panel on the tunnel wall. Grant widened the frame corridor vertically and shifted restraint load away from the left stabilizer. He gave 1 pulse, asking for the precise thrust line. Ithara answered twice. She rolled Riftwing 12 onto its side and used only the lower drive to carry them between the heat sheet and the panel. Grant held the frame at the angle she needed. For 2 seconds, the craft passed through a gap neither of them could have used alone. When they cleared it, Ithara returned the authority in the agreed sequence. No alarm sounded. No energy warning appeared. Grant realized the success felt different from stopping the craft at the grandstand. There, he had acted because Ithara had no control. Here, he had acted because she had trusted him with a specific part of it. "That line was 6 inches from my limit," he said. "It was 8. My instruments say 6. Your instruments were behind us. I see cooperation has not damaged your confidence. It was never one of the vulnerable systems." Artificial atmosphere struck the hull. Sound returned in a roar. Beyond the tunnel, Crownline Circuit rose toward the gravity inversion field. The core split into 3 transparent arcs stacked above the planet. Each arc crossed a region where the direction of apparent weight changed faster than a human reflex could follow. Grant brought up the field sequence. First inversion in 8 seconds. Load rotates right, then upward. "It will change early," Ithara said. "The official timing says 8. The leaders are compressing the field. The gate will compensate." Grant looked ahead. The first group had entered the upper arc, forcing the course network to shift the field so trailing vehicles would not cross their wake. Ithara was right. The rotation would begin almost a second early. Call the sequence. Right in 3. Up in 2 more. Reverse half a count after the blue rail. Grant prepared the frame rotation. At the first change, he hesitated. The memory of the locked throttle was still in his hands. Instead of releasing the slow correction, he kept 1 stabilizer active. Ithara changed thrust exactly when she had called it. Grant's remaining correction fought her. Riftwing 12 hit the gravity change sideways. The hull slammed against its restraint field. Grant's injured shoulder struck the cradle, and a warning showed that the left stabilizer had lost part of its safety margin. "You held it," Ithara said. "I saw the field shift again." "No, you saw me take control." The second inversion approached. If the weakened stabilizer received another crossload, it could force them out of the race. Grant checked Ithara's call against the moving field. Every number matched. 1 pulse, he said. She gave the signal. He answered twice and locked out his slow correction for 4 seconds. The cockpit seemed to narrow around the choice. Grant retained the frame rotation and overall corridor, but the exact thrust response belonged to Ithara. Right in two, she said. Up now. Grant rotated the frame. Ithara changed thrust. The gravity field turned the world beneath them. Orvanes swung from below the cockpit to the left wall, then over their heads. Riftwing 12 moved through the inversion in one clean arc, reverse after blue, Ithara said. The blue rail flashed. She reversed. Grant felt the load pass through the frame without striking the damaged stabilizer. For seconds ended. Ithara gave one pulse, and he answered twice as the slow correction returned. They were 3 positions higher. Your sequence was accurate, Grant said. That is a beautiful apology. It was a technical observation, even more beautiful. For the first time since the test lane, Grant smiled without forcing it. The rank gates appeared ahead. They were not fixed openings. The circuit generated different paths for different positions, giving the leaders the shortest route while pushing the rear field through longer, more crowded passages. Every place gain changed which gate a racer could use. It also changed network access. The higher gates needed more authority to verify vehicle identity and protect official timing. That authority created new paths into Riftwing 12. Grant saw the first one open as they moved into the middle group. We gained a confirmation channel. Can it reach the contract core? Not yet. It can read nearby safety handshakes. Ithara watched the vehicles ahead, then watched Jova. Jova Wren raced 2 lanes to their right in a red craft with a broad defensive hull. She had been in the professional field longer than Ithara, and she rarely entered a gate without securing 2 exits. Now she was drifting toward the narrowest one. Ithara sent a standard position flash from Riftwing 12 sidelights. Move left. Open space. Jova did not respond. Her vehicle's nose turned farther right. Her steering is locked, Ithara said. Grant examined the local telemetry. I cannot access her control line. You do not need to. Give me room. The shortest route opened in front of them. Taking it would move Riftwing 12 close to the front third of the field. Ithara ignored it and cut toward Jova instead. We lose the gate if you do this, Grant warned. She loses the vehicle if I do not. The path remained inside the navigation boundary. Grant could have narrowed it, but that would mean using safety authority to overrule a tactical and moral decision he did not own. He shifted the load to the right side. I will hold the frame. You take her outside. Ithara moved Riftwing 12 between Jova and the narrow gate. Their restraint fields touched. Not enough for a collision, but enough to push both vehicles toward the wider opening. Jova's craft fought the movement. Grant felt a command pulse cross the mandatory safety handshake between them. He captured its timing. Ithara fired the left drive, accepting another burst of neural pain, and forced the 2 vehicles through the wide gate. Jova's steering released the instant the danger had passed. Her sidelights flashed once in acknowledgement. Riftwing 12 emerged behind her. The short route had closed, and 3 other racers passed. Energy loss is 7% above plan, Grant said. Jova is alive. I noticed. Ithara glanced toward his station. You did not stop me. You stayed inside the structural boundary. That is not why. Grant replayed the safety handshake. A high-priority command had reached Jova's steering immediately before she lost control. The system had labeled it as a biological correction, the same label attached to Ithara's false acceleration. No, he said. It is not. He stored the trace inside Riftwing 12's temporary diagnostic buffer. It was still not certified evidence, and the network could erase it when the session closed. But for the first time, they had matching data from 2 separate vehicles. The final stretch of the first lap curved back toward the confirmation line. Ithara's breathing was steady again, though the pain indicators remained higher than they had at the start. Grant's shoulder had begun to stiffen. Neither mentioned stopping. Valid line in 20 seconds, he said. Will the core appear immediately? If the network accepts your full lap signature. If it does not, we complete another lap and pretend I enjoy surprises. Riftwing 12 crossed the line. For 1 second, nothing changed. Then a new panel opened between their control displays. It identified Ithara Qel as an active competitor, verified her neural signature, and listed her control status as sponsored ownership. Grant felt Ithara's breath break. The record was more direct than the contract language. Axiom Velocity was listed as the controlling owner of her neural support, race access, and automatic safety priority. Beneath it sat an encrypted group reference. Grant attempted to copy the record into his independent engineering log. The network rejected the transfer as an unauthorized duplication because it lacked source certification. "We can read it because you completed the lap," he said. "We cannot take it outside the race session, and we cannot write to it from this rank. But it exists." "Yes, then it has rules." Grant looked at her. There was pain in her face, but not defeat. He placed Jova's captured command beside Ithara's false acceleration. The timing differed. The priority, ownership route, and false biological label matched. "The same rules are being used on Jova," he said. Ithara stared at the two traces. "She does not use an Axiom support unit. She does not need to. The race safety network has authority over every vehicle." "Then this is larger than my contract." Grant searched for a way to preserve the two traces outside the temporary buffer. He routed them toward his personal engineering log, then toward the physical service memory attached to the breaker. Both attempts failed. The race network wrapped every active record in the organizer's certification key. A copy could leave the vehicle, but once outside it would contain no proof of its source. "I could save the numbers," he said. "I cannot prove where they came from. Dorian would call them a simulation, or a fault created by my repair. My certification code makes that accusation easy." "Then why let you race with me?" "Because if we fail, my presence gives them a second explanation. An outside engineer interfered with a damaged vehicle. Pilot error becomes repair error." Ithara looked toward Dorian's position on the remote team channel, though his image was no longer visible. "He did not oppose you because he feared you would hurt the machine. He opposed me because I had already seen it disobey you." The conclusion gave them no new tool. It removed one false hope. They could not simply survive, carry a file to an official, and wait for someone else to act. Whatever they did had to become valid inside the system before the session closed. Ahead, the gates for the second lap rearranged according to the new order. Riftwing 12 had finished the first lap below the front group. The path to higher access had grown longer. Behind them, Jova held her restored line. Farther back, two more vehicles entered the confirmation stretch under brief, unnatural corrections. Ithara placed her hands against the neural controls. "We find out how many," she said. Grant watched the second lap open. "And what happens to them when this race ends?" The second lap began with fewer open lanes and more attention from the network. Every position Riftwing 12 recovered granted access to a higher confirmation channel. Each channel also carried more safety authority into the vehicle. Grant watched the permissions grow in both directions. "The upper gates can verify our frame condition," he said. "They can also reach deeper into navigation. So moving forward gives Dorian more ways to touch us, and gives us more ways to see him do it." Ithara shifted toward the next rank gate. Her movements were smaller now, chosen to preserve cooling reserve rather than chase every opening. Grant adjusted the structural corridor around her without touching the line itself. 3 vehicles ahead, Ithara Qel entered a long turn on a stable path. He was an aggressive racer, but he never wasted movement. Ithara knew his habits well enough to notice when his hands stopped matching the vehicle. "Ithara is late," she said. Grant checked the timing. His drive is normal. His reaction is not. Ithara's craft drifted toward the outer wall. A correction arrived through his safety line, but instead of returning him to the center, it delayed the turn by another fraction. Ithara flashed a position signal telling Ithara to open the left side immediately. Ithara moved only after the second signal. His restraint field brushed the edge of Riftwing 12's corridor as he escaped the wall. That proximity forced the upper gate to exchange safety data between the two vehicles. Grant caught the pulse. It was not identical to Jova's steering lock. This one had delayed Ithara's own response and then made the delay appear biological. The method was different. The authority route was the same. 3 vehicles, Grant said. 3 effects. 1 source path. He aligned the traces. Ithara had been forced to accelerate. Jova had been locked into a bad gate. Toric had lost a fraction of reaction time. Anyone reviewing the incidents separately could blame 3 different pilots for 3 ordinary racing errors. Together, the pattern was difficult to ignore. Dorian does not need to control the race, Ithara said. He only needs to own the important moments and make every moment look like someone else's mistake. Toric's sidelights gave a brief acknowledgement before his lane carried him away. He knew Ithara had warned him, but he could not know what Grant had captured. Any open message explaining it would pass through Axiom's network. Grant tested the access route behind the false command. For less than a second, he isolated the branch feeding safety corrections into Riftwing 12. The pressure behind Ithara's eyes disappeared. "It stopped," she said. Then the navigation display filled with warnings. With the branch isolated, the automatic system could no longer distribute unexpected load. The right stabilizer absorbed the full correction from the last turn. Its temperature rose sharply. Grant restored the branch before the frame crossed its limit. Pain struck Ithara again. "How long?" she asked. 2 seconds safely. Maybe 3 if the vehicle is straight and we have cooling left. Enough to cross a gate. Not enough to finish a race. Then we do not use it to finish. We use it when one command would decide everything. Grant brought up the mechanical control map. The opening emergency had shown him which systems still answered when software did not. He could prepare a direct route from his station to the stabilizers, but it would bypass the automatic layer that protected the frame from human error. He shifted part of the left stabilizer's load to the center pair, compensating for the damage from the first gravity inversion. Then he opened a dormant physical control line without activating it. His certification code appeared beside both changes. Ithara watched the entries. How many changes before they suspend you? Suspension is the optimistic version. Grant, rebalancing load is within my authority. Opening that line is within my authority if I do not. Use it. Removing the organizer lock is not. And you are identifying the lock now. Identifying a bad idea is still legal. For how long? That depends on how quickly I have it. The next gate lifted Riftwing 12-2 positions. Grant gained access to the schedule layer of the race network, where equipment checks, medical updates, and post-race commands waited for the finished result to become official. Most were routine commands for cooling releases, restraint resets, and neural disconnection. One group of files was not. The same encrypted reference that appeared beneath Ithara's ownership record linked to multiple racers in the lower half of the field. Grant could not read every name yet, but he saw Jova's vehicle number, Toric's, and Nemidos's. Nemi raced near the rear in a narrow green craft. She had been correcting too early at every gate, as though she felt danger before it arrived. Ithara studied her movement. Those are calibration responses. For what? A support shutdown. The system tests where sensation becomes control, then raises the threshold until the link cannot answer. Grant opened Nemi's post-race schedule. The command was timed for the instant after finish confirmation. It would lock Nemi's neural access, deactivate her sensory archive, and close any ownership dispute. They are not only controlling the result, he said. They are making sure the people they use cannot prove what they felt. Ithara's breathing lost its count. Grant did not tell her to steady it. He waited until she did so herself. "How many?" she asked. The next permission tier opened as they passed another vehicle. More entries resolved. Everyone in the lower contract group. At least 9. Possibly more if the hidden entries belong to reserves. Jova. Toric. Nemi. Yes. If they finish low, they are locked. If they withdraw before confirmation, their current contracts can trigger the same condition yours does. Either way, the session closes and the raw sensory record disappears. Nemi's green craft entered a long bank ahead of them. Her hands moved early again, correcting for a pressure wave that had not reached her lane. The unnecessary change cost speed. A higher-ranked vehicle passed, and Nemi dropped closer to the position where the post-race lock would apply. Ithara sent a basic timing signal, telling her to wait for the actual field. Nemi tried. Grant saw the pilot hold her line against the first false sensation. Then the pain feedback increased, and her craft turned anyway. She can feel that the signal is wrong, Ithara said. She cannot separate it from her body long enough to reject it. The network is testing how much force it needs, and recording her reactions as consent. Grant opened the group structure as far as his current permission allowed. Axiom had linked the athletes for efficiency. One ownership registry distributed safety priority, medical access, and post-race commands to every sponsored or deck-controlled entry. The design saved Axiom from managing individual permissions. The shared registry also suggested a weakness. If one valid entry could reach the group, the same path might reach every link pilot. For now, it proved that freeing Ithara alone would leave the larger control structure intact. The group registry is the weakness, he said. It lets Dorian reach all of them through one authority. Can we use the same path? Not from this rank. But if a higher gate grants control state verification, the structure may let one valid entry request a change for the linked records. Request, not confirm. Correct. No pilot can legally consent for another. Ithara watched Nemi fight another false correction. Then they will have to be given enough control to confirm for themselves. They still had no plan, but now they knew what it had to accomplish. Every racer needed enough control to confirm an individual choice. Ithara looked ahead at the leaders. Until that moment, winning had meant reaching enough authority to free herself. Now a private victory would preserve the system behind her. Axiom could let her stand on a podium while 9 other racers lost the ability to prove they had been controlled. Then our finished position is no longer the objective, she said. We still need a higher position to reach the control record. We use the rank. We do not protect the result. Grant studied the available permissions. The contract core was visible, but every right function remained gray. Higher gates allowed vehicles to confirm identity and technical status, so no sponsor could alter a result after the fact. Somewhere near the front, those functions had to become active. We need to know exactly where right authority begins, and reach it without spending the last of our cooling reserve. Ithara shifted her line. Instead of challenging the next racer at the gate, she waited until the course widened and passed using less thrust. The move was slower but cleaner. Grant noticed the change. You gave up the short attack. It would have forced 2 isolation windows. You are protecting my systems. Our systems. The correction was quiet. It changed more than the pronoun. They began climbing through the field with less conflict and more intention. Grant called the load before each gate. Ithara told him when the neural pain changed shape, allowing him to distinguish Axiom's interference from actual strain. When he needed to narrow her corridor, he gave the reason before taking authority. When she planned a dangerous pass, she explained the exit rather than demanding blind trust. At one gate, Dorian inserted a false turn that matched Ithara's breath and her usual left-hand preparation. Grant nearly accepted it. Ithara did not give a transfer pulse. Not mine, she said. Grant held his own line. The false command vanished before it could become movement. He is learning the rhythm, Grant said. But he cannot make both of us agree. That is a surprisingly comforting description of our relationship. Do not become comfortable. There is balance restored. Her laugh lasted only a second, but changed the cockpit. Neither of them had forgotten the risk. The humor did not remove it. It made room to breathe inside it. They entered the gravity field for the second time. The environment was the same, but their task had changed. On the first lap, the field had tested whether Grant could release control. Now, they used it to gain rank without spending energy they needed later. Ithara called the sequence. Grant rotated the frame early. She used the changing field to carry Riftwing 12 past 2 vehicles with almost no additional thrust. At the exit, the front confirmation channel opened. Grant searched the permissions instead of the track. A new function appeared beside the contract core. Lead corridor access remained view-only, but right access would open during final confirmation. He traced the rule. Any vehicle in the lead corridor could verify its pilot identity, frame condition, and legal control state before crossing the finish line. That authority existed to stop teams from changing a winner's status after the race. The grouped Axiom contracts used the same legal control field. "I found the right window," he said. "How long?" "From entry into the lead corridor until the first finish confirmation. Less than a minute, depending on our position." "Can my signature change the group?" "It can initiate a control state update because your active contract is linked to it. But you cannot confirm freedom for everyone. Then it is useless. Not if the update returns their control before confirmation. You can move every linked entry to pending self-control. Each racer would get a temporary choice window. If they cross the confirmation zone using their own neural signature, the choice becomes theirs, not yours." Ithara followed the chain on the display. An axiom cannot reverse multiple independent signatures. Not through the race network. The finish rule blocks any single sponsor from overriding a control state confirmed by the pilot and the lead system. "What is the cost?" Grant did not answer immediately. He enlarged the signature pathway. To initiate the update, Ithara would have to link her full neural signature to the group control registry. During that time, every part of her attention normally used for slow correction would belong to the network. Grant could hold the frame and the broad course. He could not reproduce her reflexes through the final gravity inversion. Worse, the right line diverged from the fastest path to the finish. The moment Ithara connected to it, Riftwing 12 would leave the winning route. You can use the lead corridor to confirm your own status and keep the finish. Line, Grant said. That gives you a result axiom may not be able to erase. Or you can connect to the group. If you do, we leave the winning line and your result will be invalid. Can we reconnect after the update? Not before the first vehicle confirms the finish. The same channel carries both actions. One neural input, one path, one window, so I can win my freedom in public or give everyone a chance to confirm theirs. Yes. Can you hold Riftwing 12 while I am linked? Grant looked at the remaining cooling reserve, the damaged stabilizer, and the organizer lock guarding the mechanical control line. I can hold the frame if I finish the changes I started. At the final inversion, I will have to remove the organizer lock and take the stabilizers directly. Your license? It will record my code the instant I open the line. Is there another way? Not one that exists on this vehicle. Ithara's gaze moved to the finish model. If I choose the group, do not make your decision because you think you owe me. I do not owe you. She looked at him. I respect you, Grant said. That is more inconvenient. For a moment, the noise of the vehicle seemed far away. Then a gate warning sounded. The leaders had entered the final section of the second lap. Riftwing 12 was one position outside the access tier they needed. Grant returned the track display to the center. You do not have to answer now, he said. But the final lap begins in 70 seconds. Ithara placed her hands against the controls. The thin silver filaments at her temples brightened with the load of the link. A win that leaves them owned is not freedom, she said. The words were not a speech. They were a decision. We take the group. Grant opened the final mechanical map. Then I take the lock. They had 1 minute before the final lap. The race leaders crossed the second lap line while Grant finished his calculations. Their finish estimates appeared on the timing display. Once the fastest craft reached the final confirmation zone, the control window would close for the entire field. They had less than 7 minutes. Ithara reviewed the positions of the linked racers. Jova and Torek remained within signaling range. Nemi was farther back, separated by 2 gates that would change again on the final lap. If we enter the lead corridor too early, Dorian has more time to force us out, she said. If we enter late, the update may not reach Nemi before the finish closes. Then we need the final access gate, not the first one. Grant traced her intended line. It preserved cooling reserve and reduced the time Dorian could attack through lead authority, but it required Riftwing 12 to gain several positions in the last third of the lap. This route leaves no second attempt. We lost that when the breaker reserve was spent. You have been listening. I listen whenever you say something useful. Grant marked the route. That must make for long, quiet periods. The exchange gave them one calm breath before the countdown changed. Ithara then became serious again. If I lose speech during the group link, do not pull me out unless the signature itself fails. The pain will look worse than the structural load. I need a limit I can measure. If my breathing stops for more than 2 counts or my right hand loses response, the link is no longer under my control. If either happens, I close the right attempt. Yes, it was the first time Ithara had given him permission to end one of her actions under a defined condition. Grant accepted it as a boundary, not ownership. For the frame, he said, if both center stabilizers reach red, I abandon the lead corridor and move us to runoff. I will tell you before I do it if there's time. Agreed. Their plan now contained 2 ways to fail and no hidden authority. The clarity made it more frightening, but it also made the trust real. Grant used 40 seconds of it to finish preparing a control path he hoped never to activate. He shifted another fraction of the left stabilizer's load into the center frame and set hard limits that could be read without the automatic safety network. He also prepared a dormant physical brace in the center frame to absorb one emergency load. He could not remove that network yet. Doing so before they held right authority would give Dorian proof of an illegal modification and no reason to keep them in the race. He marked the organizer lock in red. When I open this, he said, the automatic layer stops protecting us from both Axiom and me. How long can the frame survive? If the load follows the sequence, long enough. If it does not, we have 1 manual correction before the center stabilizers saturate. 1. I prefer clear budgets. Ithara studied the final course. The gravity sequence will change when the leaders enter. I cannot call the last inversion until we are close enough to read their wake. Then call it when you know. I will not ask you to guess early. She looked back at him. And when the signature link takes my attention, I hold the slow corrections. At the inversion, I give you full reflex control, even if my line leaves the finish. Especially then. Ithara gave 1 transfer pulse. Grant answered twice. It was not yet a transfer of authority. It was a promise about the one that would matter. The final lap opened. Dorian attacked before they crossed the line. Pain flooded Ithara's neural feedback, not as a sharp signal, but as pressure behind her eyes and down both arms. At the same time, the network inserted a turn toward a crowded gate. False right, Grant said. Confirmed. He isolated the branch for 1 second. The pain dropped enough for Ithara to choose the left opening. Grant restored the line before the right stabilizer overheated. 2 vehicles blocked the path ahead. The shorter gate belonged to the higher-ranked craft on the inside. Ithara could not pass both without forcing Grant to use another isolation window. She flashed Jova's signal, asking her to open the center. Jova was still 3 positions behind, but she saw it. Her red craft moved toward the outside lane during a moment when the network had not taken her steering. Torek followed the opening, forcing the gate system to widen the center path to avoid overlapping restraint fields. Ithara drove Riftwing 12 through the space their movement created. Jova and Torek could not know the full plan. They knew only that Ithara had protected them and was asking for room. They chose to give it while they still could. Riftwing 12 moved into the front access tier. The next section crossed a narrow exterior span where Orvanes filled half the cockpit view. The planet's copper deserts turned far below, while the black curve of space hung above the rail. The leaders left pale trails of heated particles across the course. Grant watched the trails because they revealed more than the official field map. One curved sharply toward the inside gate, showing where the gravity layer had begun to shift onto the lead vehicles. Final inversion is building early, he said. Not the full sequence yet. I am marking the first rotation. Ithara adjusted her approach without committing to a thrust change. Dorian inserted a false pain spike at the same moment, trying to make the natural field warning indistinguishable from interference. Left shoulder is false, she said. Pressure in my lower hand is real. Grant separated the 2 readings. The real signal matched the particle trail. He rotated the corridor a fraction before the official map updated. Riftwing 12 crossed the span without spending an isolation window. The success preserved the final 2 seconds of clean control they would need inside the lead corridor. It also showed how far their partnership had changed. Grant no longer treated all pain as a reason to take authority. Ithara no longer treated all caution as an attempt to control her. The network reacted immediately. New authority opened inside the vehicle, and Dorian used it to lock the next preferred route. Grant saw the command arrive through the same channel that verified their frame. Gate path is compromised. Can you isolate it? For 2 seconds. We need 4. Ithara examined the moving barriers. We do not need the gate for 4. She cut thrust before the entry, letting a faster craft pass. Its rank changed the gate assignment. The barrier opened a different route for the new order, and Ithara accelerated through before Dorian's system recalculated. The maneuver cost them 1 position, then returned 2. You used the ranking rule against the ranking system, Grant said. Technical observation, deep admiration disguised as one. Her breath remained controlled, but the pain indicators continued to climb. Grant wanted to tell her how close she was to the limit. Instead, he stated the numbers. Neural noise at 60%. Cooling reserve at 23. Left stabilizer has 1 heavy cycle. My vision is clear. Hands responsive. Continue. He accepted the report. Ahead, the course climbed toward the final gravity field. The lead corridor began on the far side. To enter it, they had to pass 2 vehicles before the next rank gate and hold the position until the right channel recognized Ithara's signature. Dorian inserted a delayed response pulse. Ithara's left hand failed to answer for a fraction. Riftwing 12 drifted. Grant saw the movement begin, but could not simply correct without knowing whether she had chosen it. 1 pulse if that is yours. Nothing. He took the corridor. The vehicle returned to center. Ithara's hand responded again, and she signaled once. Grant answered twice and returned authority. Thank you, she said. It was the first time either of them had used the words since the grandstand. The next 2 passes demanded no new trick. Grant read the load, and Ithara read the racers. She moved before the inside craft could close its lane, then waited for the outside racer to waste thrust fighting a gate. Riftwing 12 took the opening and crossed into the lead group. A notice confirmed their eligibility for the lead corridor, and the right function appeared in the contract core. We have it, Grant said. Not yet. She was right. Eligibility was not access. They had to hold the rank until the corridor began. Dorian sent 3 short commands in rapid succession. 1 forced acceleration. 1 locked the right route. The third copied Grant's 2-pulse confirmation. For a dangerous instant, the network made it appear that Grant had accepted a transfer Ithara had never given. She felt the false approval and started to follow it. Grant broke their shared breathing rhythm on purpose. He inhaled sharply on the wrong count. Ithara recognized the mismatch before the command reached thrust. She canceled it and reset her breathing to his new rhythm. He copied your signal, she said. Not both of us. He will try again. Then we keep changing together. The last gate opened. Riftwing 12 crossed into the lead corridor. The contract core changed from gray to white, confirming that right access was active. The finish line remained ahead and below, a bright arc crossing the fastest path. To the left, a narrower verification lane curved away from it. Entering that lane would keep the right connection stable, but no vehicle could return to the winning route before the finish window closed. Ithara steered left. Dorian's voice entered their cockpit. Pilot Qel, your chosen route invalidates your result. It was the first time he had spoken to them since launch. Ithara did not answer. Return to the finish path. Axiom will review your support status after the race. Grant closed the voice channel. Necessary? Ithara asked through clenched teeth. No. Satisfying. Less than before. They entered the verification lane. Ithara opened the group control record. Her signature appeared at the top, followed by the linked entries of Jova, Toric, Nemi, and the other controlled racers. The system allowed her to request a state change because she was both an active member of the group and a verified competitor in the lead corridor. It did not allow her to confirm for anyone else. That was the protection they needed. Beginning signature link, she said. Frame is mine. She gave one pulse. Grant answered twice. The neural line widened. Ithara's awareness moved into the control registry. Her hands remained on the physical interface, but the slow corrections began to fade from her command stream. Grant took them. He held the nose inside the verification lane and distributed load around the damaged stabilizer. The first group entry changed, confirming that a control state update had been requested. Dorian struck the link with a force command toward the finish path. Riftwing 12 rolled right. Grant corrected through the normal system. The automatic layer accepted his input, then delayed it. The organizer lock was letting Dorian's safety priority outrank him. He used the mechanical line for the first time without opening the lock fully. The frame responded, but the control fought back. Ithara, I need. The next group entry. Her voice came slowly. Jova linked. Toric linked. Keep going. Pain warnings filled her side of the display. Grant could no longer ask her to describe them. Her attention was inside the signature process. The final gravity field began to form around the course. The leaders on the finish path entered first, changing the sequence exactly as Ithara had predicted. Grant could see the broad rotation, but not the precise thrust timing needed to cross it. Ithara, I need the inversion call. For 1 second, she did not answer. Then her racing instinct cut through the link. Right rotation in 4. Up after 1.5. Full reverse at blue. Grant entered the sequence into his physical limits. The network forced another turn toward the finish. This time the automatic layer locked his correction completely. The red mark on the organizer lock waited beneath his hand. If he opened it, every protection tied to the race authority would fall away. There would be no software buffer between his mistake and the frame. His certification code would be recorded before the control even moved. Grant opened the lock. A warning recorded the license violation under his certification code, but he did not look at it again. The physical controls came alive under his hands. They were heavier than the assisted system and carried every vibration of the frame into his injured shoulder. Grant routed load into the center stabilizers, released the overheated left unit, and held Riftwing 12 inside the verification lane. The craft stopped fighting him. It also stopped protecting him. Nemi linked, Ithara said. Group state ready. Field rotation in 2. I cannot confirm the update and handle slow correction. You do not have to. You cannot handle the thrust reversal. I know. The gravity field turned. Grant rotated the frame right. The center stabilizers climbed towards saturation. His manual correction kept the hull aligned, but only Ithara could move the thrust at the exact point the field changed. He released the reflex channel. 1 pulse. 2 pulses. Full reflex is yours, he said. Ithara took it. For a fraction of a second, she held the group update, the vehicle, and the pain together. Then she chose the route away from the finish and reversed thrust at the blue rail. Riftwing 12 fell sideways through the changing gravity. Grant held the frame. Ithara changed thrust again. The left stabilizer shut down. The center pair reached their warning limit. Grant moved the remaining load into the physical brace he had prepared on the second lap. It was not enough to make the craft stronger. It was enough to keep it intact for 1 more rotation. Ithara completed the update. Every linked contract changed at once, and the system marked each one as pending self-control confirmation. Across the field, 9 racing vehicles moved as if waking from the same interrupted thought. Jova's steering returned. Toric's delayed response vanished. Nemi stopped correcting for pain that had not yet arrived. They were not free yet. The pending state would expire if they failed to cross the confirmation zone with their own signatures. Dorian understood the same thing. The race network pushed the affected vehicles towards separate gates, attempting to prevent them from reaching confirmation before the leaders finished. Ithara left the signature link and returned fully to her controls. Her breath was ragged. Her hands shook, but they answered. She sent the same position signal she had used for Jova, telling the group to open the center. Jova responded first. Instead of taking the clear route to the finish, the veteran turned her red craft across the boundary between 2 gates. Toric moved beside her. Their restraint fields forced the course to widen the center path rather than close it on either vehicle. Nemi joined from behind. The other racers saw the same signal and made their own choices. Some protected the outside. Others held the rear from being split. No central command directed them. They knew how to form moving cover because they were professional racers, and Ithara had already shown them the signal under real danger. The group became a shield around the verification lane. The formation did not hold perfectly. These racers had competed against one another for years, and several had never practiced moving cover together. One pilot entered too close to Toric and forced him toward Jova's restraint field. Another responded to an old race instinct and started toward an open finish lane. Ithara could not command them. She repeated the position signal and held Riftwing 12 steady enough for the others to read her intention. Jova corrected the spacing first. She dropped half of vehicle length, allowing Toric to move outward. Nemi took the exposed rear position, even though it left her craft closest to the network's force corrections. The racer moving toward the finish saw the new shape, rejected another sponsor command, and returned voluntarily. The formation stabilized because each pilot chose the part that matched their skill. It was slower than the arranged finish order and stronger than a command structure Dorian controlled. Grant saw a final forced lane closure appear ahead. Center gate is narrowing. Can the formation widen it? Only if both outer fields enter together. Ithara flashed left and right at the same time. Jova and Toric matched their positions. The gate system detected 3 overlapping restraint zones and opened the center to prevent a collision. Nemi drove the rear of the formation through before it could close. The racers had used the safety rules without surrendering their choices to them. Riftwing 12 emerged from the gravity field in the middle of it. Frame status? Ithara asked, unhappy but present. Can we reach confirmation? Grant checked the physical controls. Cooling reserve was almost gone. The center stabilizers could not tolerate another inversion, but the remaining path was straight. If no one asks us to turn. Jova moved to their left. Toric took the right. Nemi held behind them as Dorian sent force position commands through the race network. The commands reached the newly restored racers, but they no longer had ownership priority. Each pilot could reject them. One by one, they did. The first lead vehicle crossed the official finish line. Its sporting order began entering the network, but the confirmation cycle had not yet closed. During that same cycle, the shield formation crossed the control confirmation zone. Jovaes neural signature resolved. First, and the system recognized her as self-directed. Toric followed, then Nemi. The remaining linked entries confirmed in rapid succession, each one independent, each one protected by the same rule that prevented a sponsor from changing a pilot's legal status after the finish. Ithara's entry waited for her. She placed both hands against the interface. Ithara Qel, the system said. Confirm control state. Self-directed. The record accepted her signature and recognized her as self-directed. Axiom Velocity's ownership priority vanished from Riftwing 12. The pressure behind Ithara's eyes released so suddenly that she gasped. Dorian attempted to reopen the sponsor channel, but the network refused. Multiple independent signatures had been confirmed, so any new change required fresh consent. The system had not exposed itself through a public confession. No speech had defeated it. Axiom had lost control because the athletes used the race's own verification rule at the one moment when the sponsor could not legally overrule them. The victory lasted less than a breath before every sporting display turned red. The system reported a conflict and invalidated the lead order. The formation had cross-verification outside the official finish sequence. Multiple vehicles carried control states that contradicted the ownership status recorded at the start. The race network could no longer certify the arranged result without certifying its own inconsistency. The Urvani's Vector Grand Prix had no valid winner. Grant did not care. Riftwing 12 was still moving, and the normal safety layer was gone. Thrust down gradually, he said. No full shutdown. Ithara reduced power in controlled steps. Grant kept the frame straight with the physical line. The craft entered the runoff lane surrounded by Jova, Toric, Nemi, and the other released racers. The center stabilizers began to flicker. 10 seconds, Grant said. Ithara cut another level of thrust. 6. The runoff restraints caught the craft. Grant held the nose steady until their speed fell below the point where a stabilizer failure could turn them. Then he released the physical controls. Riftwing 12 rolled to a stop. Silence entered the cockpit. Grant's hands remained wrapped around the manual bars. His burned forearm throbbed, and his shoulder had gone almost numb. Ithara turned in her cradle. The silver filaments at her temples had dimmed. Her face showed exhaustion, but the neural pressure indicators on her display were clear. "You gave me full reflex control," she said. "It seemed rude to keep it. You knew I would leave the finish. That was the plan. You wanted to correct me." Grant looked at the bright finish line in the distance. "Very badly. But you did not." "No." The cockpit hatch opened. Elson Marr stood outside with medical staff and race officials. Beyond her, released racers were climbing from their vehicles. Jova stepped onto the runoff surface without assistance. Torek touched the controls of his craft once before disconnecting, as if confirming they still belonged to him. Nemi removed her neural interface only when she chose. Elson looked at Grant's station. "Your certification code is attached to 3 prohibited actions," she said. "You bypassed the organizer lock, disabled required automated protection, and assumed direct mechanical control during an active race." "That sounds accurate. Your official test license is revoked as of the recorded violation." Ithara started to rise. Grant stopped her with a small shake of his head. Elson had not invented the rule, and Grant had known the price before he opened the lock. "Understood," he said. Elson turned to Ithara. "The race result is cancelled. No title will be awarded." "Understood." Dorian Vaughn appeared at the edge of the runoff lane, blocked from the vehicles by officials enforcing the newly confirmed control states. For the first time, his calm expression had failed. He did not explain himself. He had no order left that the racers were required to obey. Jova came to stand beside Ithara. Torek and Nemi joined her. None of them faced Dorian. They looked toward the empty finished display, then at one another. There was no winner. There were no own pilots either. Grant unfastened his restraint and climbed from Riftwing 12. His right leg nearly failed under him after the long pressure of the manual controls. Ithara reached toward him, then stopped before touching. "May I?" she asked. Grant nodded. She offered her forearm instead of taking his weight without permission. He used it to steady himself. The gesture lasted only until he could stand. It was enough. The race session closed without a winner. Medical crews moved from vehicle to vehicle, but for the first time the released racers controlled when their neural links ended. Ithara sat on the edge of Riftwing 12's cockpit, while a technician waited for her permission to approach the support unit behind her ears. She looked at the status panel, where one word now appeared beneath her name, self-directed. No countdown followed it, and no sponsor command waited beneath it. "Disconnect," she said. The technician did. The racing interface faded from her senses in a slow, controlled release. She closed her eyes as the track became only a place beneath her feet rather than a second nervous system wrapped around her body. Grant stood several yards away while a medic secured his shoulder and covered the burn on his forearm. Elsamar approached with a small black credential card. The card had once carried Grant's access to every major test program on Orvanis. Now its authorization field was blank. "The revocation is automatic under the license terms," Elson said. "Your engineering certification remains valid outside sanctioned race testing, but you may not operate or supervise a vehicle under our official program." I knew the condition. Knowing does not make it lighter. "No." She handed him the card. "It also does not make it less real." Grant accepted it. Elson looked toward the released racers. "Their control states are valid. The sporting result is not. Those findings can coexist. Can Axiom reverse the states? Not through the race network. Each pilot would have to provide new consent." Grant glanced at Dorian, who was surrounded by officials demanding system access records he no longer controlled alone. "I would not expect many volunteers." Elson almost smiled. "Neither would I." She left without offering to restore what Grant had lost. That mattered to him. A clean victory would have made. The price feel temporary, something the story of the day could erase. Instead, his name was gone from the official test roster before he left Crownline Circuit. Ithara joined him near the service exit. She moved carefully, not because Axiom was limiting her support, but because the neural strain had not disappeared with the contract. Jova kept her sensory archive, she said. Torek and Nemi did too. All of them. Good. The official result is already listed as invalid. Also good. Your name is listed beside the safety violations. Less good, but consistent. She studied the blank credential in his hand. You could say you acted because I ordered you. You did not. I could say it now. That would turn your choice into my defense. I made my own. Ithara looked back at the silent course. And I made mine. Neither apologized. 3 months later, Axiom Racing no longer had enough willing pilots to field a professional team. Axiom Velocity still existed. It owned offices, contracts, and machines. What it no longer possessed was automatic authority over the athletes who had crossed the confirmation zone. The race records could not be changed without their signatures, and none of them signed. Ithara used the months after the Grand Prix to organize the released racers. Freedom did not provide a repair bay, a budget, or a working vehicle. It did not make 9 professional competitors agree on how to build a team. Jova wanted strict seniority. Torek wanted every pilot to own an equal share. Nemi refused any system that allowed medical support to become team property. Ithara listened, argued, revised, and kept them at the same table until they produced rules none of them had been forced to accept. They called the team Open Vector Racing. Its first facility occupied an old cargo repair hangar far from Crownline Circuit. The roof leaked during seasonal storms. The team owned 1 used training craft, 2 damaged stabilizers, and a collection of tools acquired from pilots who preferred a poor independent team to another wealthy owner. Ithara refused offers that would have solved those problems by recreating the old ones. Several companies wanted naming rights, medical access, or priority over pilot data in exchange for equipment. She read every agreement with Nemi and rejected any clause that turned support into leverage. Jova organized training schedules. Torek rebuilt damaged restraint emitters instead of buying new ones the team could not afford. Nemi designed a separate consent record for medical data. Ithara still made difficult decisions, but every authority she used came from rules the racers had voted to accept and could later change. Their progress was slow. The first repaired stabilizer failed a stationary load test. The training craft could not complete a full-speed lap. Open Vector did not become successful merely because its principles were better. It became real because the athletes kept choosing to work after no contract forced them to stay. The first rule was written above the entrance. Control of a vehicle can never become ownership of a person. Grant saw the words on his first visit and said, "The lettering is uneven." Ithara stood on a lift platform with paint on one hand. "You are welcome to leave." I did not say I disliked it. You looked at the most important rule in the building and inspected the spacing. I am an engineer. Respect takes many forms. She lowered the platform. And what form does respect take when the roof leaks? A ladder, usually. Grant had spent the same 3 months rebuilding his work from the bottom. His engineering license still allowed him to repair civilian vehicles and advise private operators. His revoked test credential kept him away from sanctioned race machines, major development programs, and every employer that depended on approval from the Orvanese Racing Authority. He found work with small manufacturers that could not afford official pilots. Their vehicles were slower, older, and often more interesting because no perfect system hid their mistakes. Grant tested them on private industrial loops where his race credential was not required. He repaired what failed and accepted that none of it restored the career he had lost. Open Vector did not offer him a title that pretended otherwise. Ithara asked him to review a dual-control design. The teams used. Training craft had been built for an instructor and a student. The instructor station could override every decision in the forward cradle. Ithara refused to put a pilot into it until the hierarchy was removed. Grant spent 2 weeks tracing the controls. If both stations can stop the vehicle, Jova said during the design review. One pilot can destroy another pilot's run. Yes, Grant replied. Then why allow it? Because the alternative lets one pilot keep the other moving after a real limit has been reached. Ithara examined the physical switch he had installed beside each cradle. Can either station restart after the other stops? No. A stop returns the vehicle to a neutral glide and requires both physical switches to reset. Can one pilot use it to take the other's control? No. It removes thrust authority from both. It does not transfer authority. Nemi leaned over the display, and the support data belongs to the person who produces it. The vehicle may read load limits during the run. It cannot store the sensory archive without separate consent. Ithara added one more rule to the operating protocol. Before either pilot transferred control, both had to state any pain, fatigue, or system limit that could affect the vehicle. Grant read it. You made honesty a technical requirement. You made trust a physical switch. That sounds like cooperation. Do not become comfortable. The words had not changed. The warmth behind them had. OpenVector's first private test took place 6 months after the canceled Grand Prix. There were no spectators. No rank gates changed the route. No sponsor held a control priority. The old training loop curved around the repair hangar beneath the evening sky of Orvanes. Grant arrived, expecting to stand beside the track with a diagnostic display. Ithara waited beside the dual-control craft in a plain silver test suit. The rear cradle is active, she said. You have a licensed private test pilot? Yes. Grant looked around the empty hangar. He is impressively quiet. He is also late. She held out the rear control key. Grant did not take it. My sanction credential is still revoked. This is a private loop. The vehicle is not registered for competition. Your independent test authorization is valid here. You checked. Several times. That is almost romantic. It is paperwork. On Orvanes, I am beginning to suspect they are the same thing. Ithara smiled openly this time. They entered the vehicle. The two control displays came alive. Between them sat the physical stop switches Grant had designed. Neither switch had priority over the other. Ithara rested her hands on the forward interface. There was no ownership notice beneath her name. I'm assigning you 1/2 of navigation and thrust balance, she said. Not emergency override. Not instructor authority. 1/2. Grant reviewed the boundary. It gave him enough control to influence the vehicle and enough access to abuse the trust if he chose. He accepted only the assigned range. Rear station confirms 1/2, he said. Current limits? Shoulder clear. Arm clear. Deep professional concern about your sense of humor. Noted. My neural support is stable. No pain. No visual interference. They each placed one hand near stop switch. Ithara gave one pulse. Grant answered twice. The hangar doors opened. Outside, the empty test loop waited beneath a copper sunset. No grandstand stood at the first turn. At least there is no crowd to avoid this time, Grant said. That was never my line. I know. Ithara increased thrust. Grant felt the vehicle answer both of them. He held exactly the 1/2 she had given him. When she chose the first turn, he supported the load without narrowing her route. When he adjusted the balance, she let the correction stand without fighting for the sake of keeping control. Either of them could stop. Neither of them had to surrender. The craft entered the long curve with 2 clear signals, 2 equal choices, and no system between them pretending that trust meant ownership. Grant and Ithara never won the race the world had come to watch. What they won could not be placed on a podium or engraved on a trophy. They won the right to choose, to trust without surrendering, and to stand beside someone without owning any part of them. Perhaps that was the truest finish line of all, moving forward. Together, each still free, each still able to stop, and neither afraid of the other's trust. If Grant and Ithara's journey stayed with you, please like the video and share it with someone who believes trust should never require surrender. Subscribe for more science fiction stories about courage, sacrifice, and extraordinary bonds between worlds. Thank you for listening. Until the next journey, may every choice you make truly belong to you.